Thank you, everybody. My name is Dion. I run BrightDigit in Lansing, Michigan, specializing in marketing automation, marketing development tools, and also development in the Apple space. So obviously there's iPhone and iPad, but I also develop for the Apple Watch as well as for the Mac. And actually today, mostly we probably talk about Mac development, but it will definitely involve folks who develop for the iPhone and the iPad. First, yeah, I don't have it up yet. I'm going to talk about TrySwift first, and then we'll talk about developing for Speculid second, because the TrySwift stuff is probably a little bit quicker. But I did go to TrySwift this year. In New York City. It was the week of Labor Day. Sorry. It was the week of Labor Day, and it was the first time I've been to New York as an adult, so that's a fun experience. I went to go see the World Trade Center, and being at an Apple conference, everybody suggests you go to the Apple store at the Grand Central Station. So I did do those. Those were like the only two sites I really wanted to go see. I walked through Central Park, or not Central Park, but Times Square. I was not amazed by Times Square. It's like a ginormous pop-up ad. But New York is very cool, and it was a really interesting conference. I'm really glad I had the opportunity to go for a week or for a couple days. And was mostly interested in what were the trends as far as how people are using Swift, what APIs are people really interested in, and there's some stuff that wasn't surprising, but there was some stuff that was. The most obvious thing was ARKit and CoreML was really hot. I counted about 4 speakers that talked about something about ARKit and CoreML. There was Brett Devon, who talked about face tracking and how face tracking works. There was Audrey Tam from Ray Wunderlich, who talked about using the Apple tools, the new Apple tools that Apple has for building models for CoreML. A gentleman from Japan talked about his technique of resizing images and making them larger, called like a super resolution technique, where you could take an image that's so small and kind of using ML to figure out how to resize it. And it just showed to me, as somebody who hasn't really invested a lot of time in CoreML or ARKit. I've dabbled a little bit with Vision, but I really need to spend some time. And folks like Aline Nielsen from Google kind of showed the history of machine learning and how not only Apple, but folks at Google, Amazon, Facebook are really investing a lot of time and money. So it's something I'm definitely interested in pursuing a lot more. The one I did find, the one area or API I did find surprising was Swift on the server. I feel like whenever I hear about Swift on the server, it feels like it's a hobby project for people who are just really into Swift and want to bring it to a lot of places. But actually, there's actual corporate backing behind it now. IBM is throwing a lot of weight into Katura. Yep, and the first day I actually picked a workshop, I picked the one on Katura, and it really opened my eyes. Not so much to the technology behind it, but more so the fact that there are companies that are really moving towards Swift. Folks that use Java, for instance, as their backend, who just they don't want to do Java anymore. And I think it's at a point kind of where Node was maybe 4 or 5 years ago. And I think you're going to continue to see a lot more weight being thrown around Swift on the server. I talked about the workshop. There was another gentleman from IBM that talked about the challenges he faced with Swift on the server with the enterprise company. They had Johannes Weiss, who spoke about Swift Neo. I don't know if any of you heard of that project, but it's an actual open source Apple project for networking. So it's supposed to kind of be the future of client and server-side communication. And then the two gentlemen, Chris and Ian, talked about Katura's development process and its future, and then they also had Logan Wright from Vapor speak as well. And at the end, they had this whole panel of these folks essentially coming up and talking about how big of a deal Swift on the server is. So I definitely think that there is a future there, and it seems like there's going to be some actual corporate backing around that. On a side note, podcasting continues to be big. They had Leah Culver from Breaker talk. Breaker is one of the more popular podcast apps. It's definitely much more focused on the social space as opposed to some other ones. I've followed Marco and Overcast. I'm hosting my podcasts. I have 2 podcasts right now that I host on Transistor, and that's founded by Justin Jackson. I followed the story of Relay FM and Gimlet. So podcasting just continues to grow, and this just shows that. Other topics that I thought were really interesting was Peter Steinberger, who does PDFKit, talked about his experience hacking Marzipan and building his own Marzipan app, obviously by doing a lot of hacking, you can call it, to get one built, and kind of talked about the restrictions involved in using Marzipan. Christina Moulton talked about creating her own Siri shortcut, or making an app Siri shortcut compatible. And Kaya Thomas from Slack talked about notifications and how powerful notifications have become in the last couple OSs. And then last but not least, I don't know if any of you read Sebastian DeWitt from Hidely camera app, but he also spoke. He recently put out an article about how the 10S works as far as the camera, but he also spoke and talked about his experience working at Apple and how he's one of the core groups of people who were behind the skeuomorphic design before iOS 7, and he talked about some design principles and things like that. It was a very good talk. And then Felix Krause, who runs Fastlane, talked about trusting third-party APIs and some of the things you face. So you see this photo here of a Raspberry Pi, and he explained how he used a Raspberry Pi to create a proxy to pretend that something that you were downloading wasn't actually what you were downloading. And it was kind of freaky, but very interesting. So that's just a quick summary of TrySwift. You can see my blog post on it at that URL below. And then you could also look at the videos are linked from the TrySwift site. So the workshop was Monday, and then it was 2 days of conference. So Labor Day was the workshop, and then Tuesday, Wednesday was the conference. Katura. Yeah, the IBM one. And I know nothing about Docker or Kubernetes or any of that stuff, because I haven't done any server-side stuff in a while, but it was really interesting.
Did they have you use any databases or
So I think they have an ORM that's free, but I wanted to know how to use Postgres, but Postgres isn't free on IBM's cloud service. So obviously there's a way to get around that, but yeah, I think I did end up using Postgres. Any other questions about TrySwift? A lot of younger people. I was surprised at how many people maybe have only been in Swift for a year. A lot of people who work at the companies you've heard of before, your Airbnbs, your Tinder, I would say maybe a quarter of them were from California, but I want to say 200 to 300. It's a rough guess. Yeah, I'd say so. Yeah. It was a good size. And it was very reasonable. I think it was $700. Yeah, I did Airbnb and I got a really good deal. So I was happy with that. Any other questions? Looks like you have one. All right, cool. So I'll jump into the next part of my presentation. So I've been developing an app for the last couple of years. It's got some traction, but I'm more interested in maybe talking about some of the lessons that I've learned in developing this app.